Hey, it's Jen the Liberty Lion. I got a question from someone, and they asked me this question. They said their child wants to go to community college in their state. Okay, and I think the law is the same for basically every state, so it doesn't really matter what state they're in. But the situation and the issues are basically the same. They want their child to go to, their son to go to a community college in their state, but the community college requires them to register for selective service. If they don't register for selective service, they have to pay out-of-state tuition, which of course is more expensive. So they don't get the benefit of paying in-state tuition, which is significantly less, if they don't register for selective service. So the person wants to have their child go to college with paying only in-state tuition and not register for selective service. So I'm going to explain why things are the way they are. Okay, so the first thing we need to understand is something called positive law. When contracts are written, and everything is a contract, we need to talk about that for a second. Everything is a contract. When you sit down and decide that you're going to be a certain religion, you're making a contract with God or your own consciousness or your community or your family or whatever. There are different types of contracts. So it can be an express contract, it can be an implied contract, it can be a mix of both express and implied. For example, marriage is both express and implied. So you date, that's implied. You ask for her hand in marriage, you ask the father for his permission, all these are express contracts. And then at some point, or implied contracts, and at some point in time, you express the contract through a written agreement. And then you act the contract out through the process of the act of marriage. And when you want to get a divorce, you start acting like people who want to get a divorce. You go and you sign papers that you're divorced, and then you act as if you're not married. So there's a contract called the Constitution. And the Constitution allows a certain Congress of the United States, to pass certain laws. And those laws have to be within the confines of that contract. So the laws have to be passed in such a way that they don't go against the Constitution. They stay within the powers of the Constitution. There's a process for doing that. They have to act certain things, which is the implication, and then they have to express certain things, which is the written part. So laws aren't just arbitrarily written down on a piece of paper and someone signs it and that's it. There's an entire process, a procedure that has to take place. And it has to stay within the original contract. So the laws passed have to stay within the original contract, which is in the contract, which gave Congress the powers in the first place. So you have a document that gives Congress powers, and Congress has to stay within those powers. And when they don't, they're acting outside the contract. When they're acting outside the contract, they lose the capacity to pass the laws. And so they're not laws, because they're outside of their power that was given to them in the contract that gave them the power. So how do we know when they're passing a law outside and without power or authority instead of inside with power and authority? And there's a really easy way to know this. They just don't make it easy to find out. And that way is through the positive law citation. If you go on the website, OLRC, or Office of the Law Revision Council, it clearly shows which titles have been made positive and which titles have not been made positive. The ones or parts of the titles that have been made positive, because the positive law citation can be at the beginning and it can be anywhere inside of it, but it's only everything after the positive law citation that has been actually passed and deemed to be constitutional and constitutionally passed. And those portions are given the positive law citation. The positive law citation tells a judge how to administer the law or the look-alike law. So for example, education does not have a positive law citation. War and national defense does not have a positive law citation. The IRS code does not have a positive law citation. They're not laws. The part of the requirement that they say, because they can lie and they say that they can't lie, or that they say that we can't lie and they can lie, is just them quoting something from a fake law or a policy, and policies are not laws. So they can lie and say that policies are laws, and they can lie and say that we can't lie, which is just a policy and not a law. So this whole idea that they can lie to us and we can't lie to them is just a lie in itself. So they are telling us that they're lying, but we can't lie, but they're lying about us not being able to lie. I'm not suggesting you go out and break these policies, because as we know, they do all kind of bad stuff to us when we don't follow their ought law. That's what these policies are called. They're called ought laws. Ought to be a law, but isn't. And it isn't because it doesn't have a positive law citation. So the Department of Education has no positive law citation. So if you want the benefit of being a student with in-state tuition, you have to conform and bend to the rules, because the rules are saying what you have to do. And the rules are giving you the benefit. And the rules are saying that you've got to spend money on this, and you've got to do this to save this amount of money. You know, the police, the judges, most of these judges that are hearing cases in counties and stuff, and even the Supreme Court in some ways, are administering without proper authority ought laws. Okay? They're not laws, they're ought laws. And how do we know that the judges are doing this? For one, I showed you the book that I had been reading, Philosophical Jurisdiction. But also, the law, the actual law, tells us that some laws are not laws. So in 1 USC 204, which has been made positive, and I read this code all the time, 1 USC 204A, it says, United States Code. Okay, so this is actual law. This is what the actual law is telling us. The matter set forth in the edition of the Code of Laws of the United States, current any time shall, together with the then current supplement, if any, establish prima facie the laws of the United States, general and permanent in their nature, in force on the day preceding the commencement of the session following the last session of legislation of which is included. Provided, however, that whenever titles of such code statutes have been enacted into positive law, meaning they've gone through all the constitutional tests and they've been deemed, the law has been deemed constitutional, It's given a positive law citation, and it looks like this. Positive law citation, that's what it looks like. Doesn't matter if you can see it all the way or anything, it's there. I think it might be backwards because my phone is flipped around for video, so I can make sure I'm in the video. Okay, so it's given a positive law citation once it has been proven to be constitutional. If it is not proven to be constitutional, it is not given a positive law citation. So that whenever titles of such codes shall have been enacted into positive law, the text thereof shall be legal evidence of the laws therein contained. That's the legal evidence of the laws in the title. In all the courts of the United States, the several states and the territories and insular possessions of the United States. So a positive law citation in the code tells us that a law is constitutional and it's a true, actual law. When it's not given a positive law citation, there's no evidence on the face, because it's on the face, it's written on the face, of a law ever having been made. There's no evidence of a law having been made properly and constitutional when there's no positive law citation. So if we look at military selective service and we look at the title, it's under War and National Defense. It has no positive law citation. The title for War and National Defense is not a law, it's a policy. Short title, Policy and Intent of Congress. This is what they just dream will be a law. They just want it to be a law. It ought to be a law. We want it to be a law. We're pretending it's a law, just like people pretend to court each other for marriage, or, pretend or not pretend. They're doing the pretend thing. They're doing the act thing. And then they make it a law. But this has never been made a law. It's never been made positive, because in our system of government, it has to be within the Constitution. That's one of the parts of being able to act it out and make it an actual law, express, written. Okay, so what they do is they get you to sign a paper. Once they get you to sign their papers, you've contracted. Everything's a contract. Your religion is a contract. Your belief in God is a contract. It's a contract between you and your consciousness and your higher authority. Government is a contract. Constitutions are contracts. Treaties are contracts. When you go to buy a car, it's a contract. When you get your driver's license, it's a contract. When you register your car, it's a contract. You're giving away certain rights in order to receive certain benefits. So the fact that you have to sign a selective service card is just an offer to contract. And in that contract, they say, well, we can lie to you, but once you sign the contract, you can't lie to us. And you agree to that because you signed the contract. So the question was, how do I get the benefit without giving away the rights? Well, you don't. You can't get a benefit without giving away some of your rights. Not until people grow up and realize that they prefer their rights over something that someone else can give them, until they start valuing their rights. And I'm not picking on any one particular person. I've given up a lot of my rights. My driver's license, vehicle registration, going to the education system to get educated, going and getting a college degree instead of learning on my own. I've learned way more on my own than I did in any college. All these things we do, we give up rights and we receive some sort of benefit given to us at the pleasure of the elitists who form these corporations and universities and colleges and stuff. and go into government as lobbyists to lobby the government to make ought laws or policies or not laws, pretending to be laws, and trying to pass them off as law to get us to follow them and giving us a benefit and taking away our rights. So us letting them do this to us is, I mean, we can't blame it on anyone else. It's got to be our faults, and it's going to continue to snowball and get bigger and worse and worse and worse until we have no rights left. And there's nothing we will be able to do about it because we've given up all of our rights to have a digital currency, for convenience, for the benefit of being able to go to a university with in-state tuitions. And again, I'm not talking about a particular person. I'm not degrading anyone or anything like that. I'm simply stating that you can't ask for them to give you a benefit, because this is not government. It's not government, really. It's a pretend government using the same people that were elected into government. The same people are just pretending to have a power that they don't have. And they're getting money and kickbacks and all these other things. But when they do constitutional things, then they're wearing the hat of the government person that was elected, if in fact they really were elected. And the book that I was reading on philosophical jurisdiction is basically saying that same thing. It's saying that we have a situation where judges really have no authority, but we keep going in and submitting to them as if they did have authority. And we're not questioning it, and we're not asking them to show us their authority, to prove their authority. And they claim, well, I'm a neutral party, but without proof, there is no neutrality. It's just a game. It's a trick. It's falls under game theory. So there's only one way to really, I think, get out of the military once you sign the selective service card. So let's say you want the benefit, you want to save the money, but you still don't want your child to be drafted into the military. And there are ways to do that. And that is, I'm not sure exactly of the process, or the procedures, but the ideas behind them are religion. So you can claim that you have a religion that doesn't allow you to go to war with a country. You're a religion of peace. You're a peace person. You can join the national, or the, what do they call it? The peace party, not the peace party, the Peace Corps. You can join the Peace Corps. You can join the Peace Corps, and if you join the Peace Corps, it's contradictory to war. So war and national defense is what the selective service card is under. War and national defense, which is a policy which will give you certain benefits if you give up your rights and sign the selective service card. But if you join the Peace Corps, now you've signed up with a policy that contradicts the war policy, because now you're under peace instead of war. And so, being a contradiction, they can't expect you to do something that contradicts your consciousness. So you can claim a conscientious objection to war. So that's religion, your conscientious objection, you're joining the Peace Corps. And there may be a few other ways to get around it, but that's the basic idea of it, is that you have to be opposite of whatever it is, which is, in this case, the question about selective service was about war. So you want the benefit, you have to sign the selective service card to get the benefit, but you don't actually want to be drafted into war. And to do that, you have to have a conscientious objection to war, which is, on the other side, the flip side would be peace. You prefer a state of peace. And by the way, our Constitution is a constitution of peace, and that's why war and national defense cannot be ever constitutional, because the constitutional only allows for peace. and to defend ourselves only when we're attacked. And I think that's because the founders knew that if nobody's attacking, nobody's at war, and a peaceful state is more prosperous and beneficial to the whole than a war state, which is prosperous and beneficial to the few, like the military-industrial complex. Okay, so that's my video for now. And positive law citations, that's what we've gone over. The judges can see the positive law citation on the face of the law because this is a copy of one of the laws that has a positive law citation. It says positive law, semicolon, citation. The title has been acted into positive law. So when the judge sees that, he's like, this is constitutional. I have to sit as a constitutional judge and I have to rule constitutionally. I have to stay within the confines of the Constitution. If he's ruling on war and national defense, he's ruling as a policy. And so they say all kind of crazy stuff in their opinions because they can basically say whatever they want, probably within all the policies and not the Constitution. So they're not actually sitting as constitutional judges when they're ruling on policies. They can't. They can only, as constitutional judges, rule on constitutional things constitutionally. So we have 1 USC 204A, which tells the judge when it's constitutional, which is a positive law citation. We have the war and national defense, which is a policy, which tells them they can lie and we can't, and we have to sign the selective service card. And then you go to the Department of Education, another policy, not a constitutional law, that tells probably there somewhere that the colleges can mandate signing of the selective service. So now you got to go to this policy and conform to this policy in order to get the benefits of the other policy, education, and on and on and on and on it goes, right? So there's no end to it. You just have to separate constitutional and policy and decide if you want the benefits or if you don't want the benefits and you want government to be confined to the Constitution, then stop conforming to policy, right? I know we have no other currency and all those other arguments, but in this case, that's my answer. Policies are the devil. Okay, the Constitution meant something and we should probably maybe stick to it. Okay, have a great day.